Ever wondered what happened to women accused of heresy in medieval times? Could you have survived the accusations that ruined countless lives? The dark corridors of medieval justice held particular terrors for women who found themselves labeled as heretics. Number 5. The shattered family. What happened to your children when you were accused of heresy? How would your family cope when you were taken away? When a medieval woman was accused of heresy, her entire family structure collapsed around her. Unlike today, where legal proceedings might separate a person from their family temporarily, heresy accusations in medieval times meant complete devastation for the family unit. Isabella Bartolucci, a wool merchant's wife from Florence in 1327, faced accusations of heretical beliefs after a neighbor claimed to have overheard her questioning the divinity of Christ. Within hours of her arrest, her 4 children were removed from her home. Medieval authorities believed heretical thinking was contagious, especially from mother to child. Her youngest, only 3 years old, was placed with a distant cousin who had 7 children of her own. Isabella never saw her children again, even though she eventually recanted her supposed heresy after 8 months of imprisonment. The medieval legal system viewed women primarily as extensions of their husbands or fathers. When a woman faced heresy charges, her husband often found himself under suspicion as well. How could he not know of his wife's spiritual corruption? Records from the Languedoc region show that from 1230 to 1310, approximately 40% of husbands whose wives were accused of heresy eventually faced accusations themselves. Property was immediately seized when heresy accusations emerged. Nothing was protected from confiscation. Family homes, livestock, business inventories, even children's clothing. The medieval Inquisition financed itself largely through these confiscations. Documentation from Jacques Fournier, Bishop of Pamiers in southern France in the early 1300s, records meticulous inventories of possessions taken from accused women's households down to cooking pots and bedding. Women like Gertrude of Nivelles found the social impact on their families particularly devastating. When Gertrude was accused in 1263, her daughter's betrothal was immediately cancelled. Her son lost his apprenticeship with a successful blacksmith, and her elderly mother was evicted from the family home. The stigma of heresy accusations could persist for generations, leaving families economically and socially crippled even if the accused woman was eventually declared innocent. Number 4. The public humiliation. Have you ever felt embarrassed in public? Can you imagine being stripped and paraded through town as punishment for your thoughts? For medieval women, public humiliation formed a central part of heresy punishment. Unlike men, whose heresy was often framed as intellectual error, women's heresy was typically portrayed as moral corruption, requiring public shame as remedy. In 1231, Pope Gregory IX authorized the use of public degradation ceremonies, specifically for female heretics. These ceremonies emphasized the victim's femininity as part of the punishment. Beatrice of Brabant, accused of Cathar sympathies in 1236, was forced to wear her finest clothing to the town square, where it was ceremonially cut away piece by piece while a crowd gathered. The authorities deliberately timed her ceremony to coincide with the weekly market day, ensuring maximum witnesses. Hair held particular symbolic importance in medieval culture, representing a woman's virtue and femininity. During public penance ceremonies, accused women had their heads shaved. Records from inquisitorial courts in southern France describe women howling like animals as their hair was removed. Historians believe this ritual symbolized removing the woman's sexual power, which authorities often associated with heretical thinking. Forced wearing of identifying garments extended long past the initial accusation. Yellow crosses sewn onto outer garments marked heretics in many regions. For women, these markers often included additional symbols related to female sins: tongues for gossip or flames for lustful behavior. Agnes Courroyer of Reims wore these markers for 7 years after her 1248 conviction for heretical statements, effectively transforming her into a walking advertisement for her supposed crimes. The psychological impact of this continuous public shaming proved so severe that records show multiple women choosing suicide rather than continuing to wear the identifying garments. Ritual processions called auto de fe, acts of faith, forced accused women to walk barefoot through their communities, often carrying heavy candles while confessing their supposed crimes. Marjorie Kempe, though eventually cleared of heresy charges in England, described the trauma of such processions in her autobiography, noting that the shame was worse than any bodily torture, for in the eyes of neighbors, no explanation could undo what had been said. Number 3. The physical torture. Did you know women faced specialized torture during heresy investigations? How much pain could you endure before confessing to something you never did? The medieval judicial system employed torture as a standard investigative technique in heresy cases, but women faced gender-specific torments designed to exploit female physiology and social vulnerability. When torture authorization became standardized through Pope Innocent IV's bull Ad Extirpanda in 1252, female suspects faced immediate disadvantages. Women were believed to have lower pain thresholds and weaker constitutions, making them supposedly more likely to confess quickly under torture. This belief led to paradoxical treatment. Some records indicate women received more intense initial torture based on the assumption they would confess quickly, minimizing the total torture duration. The strappado became particularly feared among female suspects. This method involved binding the victim's hands behind her back, hoisting her by her arms, and dropping her repeatedly, causing excruciating shoulder dislocations. Court records from Barcelona in 1307 describe a midwife named Helena being subjected to this torture while pregnant, resulting in miscarriage during her third strappado session. The authorities recorded this as divine judgment, confirming her guilt. Unlike men, women faced intimate examinations disguised as investigative procedures. Inquisitors searched women's bodies for supposed devil's marks, any unusual blemishes, moles, or insensitive spots. These examinations, performed by male officials, deliberately violated medieval norms of female modesty. Jean Forestier of Arras described in testimony how she was stripped and examined 7 times over 2 days in 1460, each time by different groups of male examiners claiming to need verification of previous findings. Torture sessions for women often incorporated elements designed to maximize shame alongside physical pain. Documents from the Toulouse Inquisition described female suspects being stripped and tortured in rooms with windows deliberately left open to courtyards where male guards gathered. Psychological torture included threats against children and family members, with women often told their children would be tortured in front of them if confessions weren't forthcoming. Water torture proved particularly effective against women. Records from multiple European regions describe a method where the victim was forced to consume large quantities of water and then had her abdomen compressed. Beyond the physical pain, this method caused involuntary urination, which held particular humiliation for medieval women whose modesty and bodily control were closely tied to social reputation. Marguerite Porete, executed for heresy in 1310 in Paris, endured this torture multiple times before her execution, with clerics noting she lost control of her bodily functions repeatedly during questioning. Number 2. The impossible defense. How could you defend yourself when the accusation itself was considered evidence? What chance did a medieval woman have against the combined power of church and state? Medieval heresy proceedings created nearly insurmountable obstacles for women attempting to defend themselves, with both procedural and cultural factors stacking the system against them. Female defendants rarely learned the specific charges or who had accused them. The inquisitional system, formalized in the 13th century, prioritized protecting witnesses' identities. This secrecy made strategic defense impossible. Alison Blakeney, tried for heretical statements in Oxford in 1389, repeatedly begged to know who had reported her alleged comment about saints' relics. Court records show her stating, "How can I explain what I meant when I know not what words I supposedly spoke, nor to whom?" Women's testimony carried inherently less weight than men's in medieval courts. This legal discounting of female credibility stemmed from theological beliefs about Eve's deception in Eden. When Elizabeth Barthélemy faced the Inquisition in Montpellier in 1325, 5 women testified to her orthodox religious practices. The court record dismisses their testimony with a single line: "Women's words, easily influenced by affection and lacking firm understanding of doctrine." In contrast, a single male witness contradicting these women's accounts was deemed reliable testimony. Language barriers presented another insurmountable challenge. Inquisitorial proceedings were conducted in Latin, which few women understood. While male defendants with education might follow the proceedings, women relied entirely on translators, who summarized rather than provided verbatim translations. When Caterina Benincasa of Siena faced questioning in 1375, her responses underwent double translation, from her vernacular Italian to formal Tuscan, then to Latin, with each transition introducing interpretive changes that court records show significantly altered her meaning. Legal representation remained largely unavailable to accused women. While some regions theoretically permitted defenders in heresy cases, few advocates would risk their reputations by defending accused heretics. Those who did often focused solely on male defendants. Records from the Carcassonne Tribunal, 1280 to 1329, show 138 men received some form of legal assistance, compared to only 7 women among 412 female defendants. Perhaps most devastatingly, character defamation formed a standard part of heresy proceedings against women. Prosecutors routinely introduced evidence about sexual behavior, marital relations, and mothering skills, factors irrelevant to heresy charges, but devastating to female defendants' credibility. When Gisela Bonnet faced charges in 1321 for possessing a suspicious manuscript, the prosecution devoted significant testimony to her argumentative nature with her husband and inappropriate of general impropriety that reinforced heresy accusations. Number 1. The ultimate price. What was it like to face execution as a woman convicted of heresy? How did gender influence even the final moments of life? For those women unable to escape conviction, the final punishment reflected medieval society's particular horror of female spiritual corruption, with execution methods often containing deliberate gender-specific elements of humiliation. Burning became the predominant execution method for female heretics, chosen for its symbolic purification aspects and its terrible visibility. Records from northern France indicate women were statistically more likely to face burning than male heretics, who more frequently received opportunities for less painful execution methods like strangulation before burning. In Paris, between 1310 to 1350, approximately 78% of female heretics died by active burning compared to 42% of males who were typically strangled before the flames reached them. Medieval execution procedures deliberately emphasized the condemned woman's femininity. Court records from Cologne in 1328 describe how convicted heretic Magdalena Streicher was dressed in a white gown, resembling a bride's dress but inverted in meaning before being led to the stake. This perverted wedding symbolism reminded onlookers that the woman had rejected her proper role as Christ's faithful bride by embracing heresy. Execution drew deliberately large crowds, with women and children especially, encouraged to attend female heretics' executions as cautionary spectacles. Town records from Rouen indicate that markets were sometimes rescheduled to coincide with a woman's execution, ensuring maximum attendance. When Agnes Loiseau burned in 1435, court documents note approximately 4,000 spectators gathered with children given privileged viewing positions near the front to witness the fate of those who defy proper teaching. Some aspects of execution protocol particularly traumatized female victims. While male heretics typically wore simple garments to their deaths, women faced the additional trauma of public nudity concerns. Historical accounts repeatedly mention female victims attempting to arrange their clothing as flames approached to prevent exposure. Eyewitness accounts of Jeanne d'Arc's execution in 1431 describe how she begged for a cross to focus on during burning, but also repeatedly asked officials to ensure her dress remained secured as the flames rose. The suffering didn't necessarily end with the accused woman's death. Post-mortem punishments continued, with authorities sometimes displaying female heretics' remains differently than men's. When Marguerite Porete was executed in 1310, her ashes were specifically scattered in unconsecrated ground reserved for female criminals, separate from the disposal area used for executed men. This gender-segregated disposal reinforced the message that female heresy represented a distinct and particularly dangerous category of spiritual crime. Family members of executed women faced continued persecution and surveillance, often for generations. In communities throughout Europe, daughters and granddaughters of executed heretics faced substantial barriers to marriage, employment, and community participation. Records from Strasbourg show that between 1370 to 1425, approximately 40% of women executed for heresy had female descendants, who eventually faced similar accusations, suggesting a deliberate intergenerational targeting by authorities. What would you have done if faced with such impossible circumstances? Could modern justice systems still harbor prejudices that echo these medieval horrors?